Hard Eight, Boogie Nights, Magnolia, Punch Drunk Love, There Will Be Blood, The Master, Inherent Vice, Phantom Thread, Licorice Pizza, One Battle After Another. 10 feature films that have helped shape the face of cinema in the last 3 decades, 14 Oscar nominations for the same man, and as of this recording, 0 wins to date, one incredibly talented writer-director by the name of Paul Thomas Anderson. He is one of our greatest living filmmakers. He has delivered one masterpiece after another. How has this man never won an Academy Award? It's a big question that needs a lot of answers, diving deep into his filmography going back to the 1990s. What were the times he had 0 chance at a victory? Which were the couple of times he came pretty close to winning, I would argue? And why is he finally, after all this time, going to be an Academy Award winner on March 15th, 2026 for One Battle After Another? Hey guys, it's Brian. Welcome to the Awards Contender. I haven't made an elusive Oscar video in a long while. I thought it was finally time when it came to Paul Thomas Anderson. The man has 14 Oscar nominations. Still, as of this recording, no win. I mean, the wins are coming, let's be honest. But yeah, I thought it was finally time on the Awards Contender to dig deep into his Oscars history. All of the races he's been a part of in the writing categories, directing, and producing going back to 1998. We are talking about it all. We are touching on every single Oscar nomination Paul Thomas Anderson has ever received. As always, with the elusive Oscar videos, let's go back to the beginning. Paul Thomas Anderson was born in Studio City, Los Angeles on June 26, 1970 to Mother Edwina and Father Ernie. Paul wanted to be a filmmaker since he was a kid. He started making little movies with friends and family like as young as 8, 9, 10 years old. His first major production was at age 18 in 1988. He made the 30-minute mockumentary The Dirk Diggler Story, which later became Boogie Nights. He spent a little time in college. He studied for 2 semesters at Santa Monica College as an English major. He transferred to New York University in the early 90s to study film, but he was only there for like 2 days. He didn't have a good feel for the place, as he talked about in this interview.
Film school was never an option. It seemed to me to be a waste of time and a waste of money.
So he just started working in the industry as a production assistant in both Los Angeles and New York. He was getting his feet wet, working on some projects, and then he raised $10,000 to make a short film called Cigarettes and Coffee in 1993. This film, which later became his feature directorial debut, Hard Eight, screened at the Sundance Film Festival and made its way around the world, getting accolades. He was even interviewed about the movie when his film screened in Brazil.
It was good. It was good. I think they liked it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Cigarettes and Coffee did well enough that Anderson signed a deal with Reicher Entertainment to turn that into a feature film. His chosen title was Sydney, but the movie, eventually released to theaters in early 1997, was called Hard Eight, starring Philip Baker Hall, John C. Reilly, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Samuel L. Jackson. The film tells of an older man who takes a younger guy who's been drifting for a long while under his wing and shows him how to gamble like an expert.
I love you, John. I love you like you were my own son.
So Hard Eight is a really impressive film, especially for a young debut filmmaker. Paul Thomas Anderson is in his early 20s. He's working with these great actors. He's making a film that has a tremendous sense of place. Hard Eight is not one of his best films when we look back now, but there's a lot to really admire about that film. The performances, the camera work. It's so based in character details. It's not really about plot at all. Anyone who saw Hard Eight, and there weren't many, right? This film didn't do very well at the box office. People who watched it in early 1997, in 1996, when it started showing up in festivals and things, they recognized there was a lot of talent to this young writer-director. Unfortunately, Hard 8, when it eventually opened in theaters, was a bomb. Nobody really showed up. It didn't get a good marketing campaign. It was a very quiet release. So because the release of Hard 8 was kind of bungled, not enough people saw it, it was never going to be an Oscar nominee. But he did take his preferred cut of the film to Cannes, where he was up for a couple prizes. And more than a year after its release in early 1998, Hard 8 gets into the Film Independent Spirit Awards in 5 categories. They are Best First Screenplay for Paul Thomas Anderson, Best Supporting Male for Samuel L. Jackson, Best Male Lead for Philip Baker Hall, Best Cinematography for Robert Elswitz, and Best First Feature of the Year. It didn't win anything there, but that was something, especially because in early 1998, Paul Thomas Anderson was making the awards rounds for his second feature film, Boogie Nights, which came out at the end of 1997.
Have you ever been arrested?
Yes.
This incredible movie about the porn industry in the 1970s going into the 1980s is absolutely his calling card. This was the movie that truly put Paul Thomas Anderson on the map. Roger Ebert famously and rightfully called it a sprawling masterpiece of a movie, and it is still to this day one of my all-time favorites. It's my second favorite PTA behind Magnolia, which we'll get to. Boogie Nights is just such a blissfully entertaining watch, so well acted and shot and written and directed. The more subtle Hard 8 was never going to do wonders for his career, but Boogie Nights, you could not ignore this guy. Paul Thomas Anderson was firing on all cylinders at a young age, showing his talent that was just going to keep getting better and better. Boogie Nights was one of those critical favorites at the end of 97, going into award season in 98. It was going to show up somewhere. Was it going to get into Best Picture and Best Director at the Oscars? Unlikely, right? Because of the subject matter of the film. When there was just 5 spots in Best Picture, that wasn't going to happen. And Anderson being so young, I mean, he's 27 years old when this movie comes out. Director was never really on the table for him when it came to Boogie Nights at those big televised ceremonies. But original screenplay was absolutely on the table since there's 5 nominees in adapted and 5 in original. There was enough love for Boogie Nights. That was likely going to happen, and it did. At the 70th Academy Awards on March 23, 1998, Boogie Nights got 3 Oscar nominations. The first one was Julianne Moore for Best Supporting Actress. She didn't have any shot to win for that. That was always going to either Gloria Stewart for Titanic or Kim Basinger for LA Confidential. It was kind of between those two. Moore was just happy to be there on her very first nomination. She, of course, went on to win many years later. This was the first one. The best chance Boogie Nights had to win an Oscar that night was in Best Supporting Actor for Burt Reynolds. He won the Golden Globe Award a few weeks back and gave a wonderful speech.
Paul, who made this picture, Thomas Anderson, who was so brave to make this film.
On Oscars night, it was between Burt Reynolds and Robin Williams. Williams was in the more beloved film Good Will Hunting that got into Best Picture. He had won at SAG. Robin Williams was on his 4th Oscar nomination without a win. This was Burt Reynolds' very first nomination, turned out to be his only one. So Robin Williams was the better bet to make, and he indeed won, gave an all-timer speech, one of my favorites of the late 1990s at the Oscars. Burt Reynolds does not look happy when he loses, that clap. He clearly wanted to win that. Burt Reynolds had to know. This was probably going to be his one and only chance to win an Academy Award. It didn't happen. But someone, I would bet you, probably wasn't too concerned about, if I don't win the Oscar tonight, it'll never happen, was Paul Thomas Anderson. He was definitely going to be back. This was not going to be his one and only, but yeah, his very first Oscar nomination, 1 of 14, was Best Original Screenplay for Boogie Nights. The other nominees were As Good as It Gets, Deconstructing Harry, The Full Monty. The winner was Good Will Hunting for Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. that had been sewn up for weeks. They had a narrative, their film was in Best Picture. That was a place outside of supporting actor they could give the film a prize. There was just so much love that season for Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. I mean, I remember that night. There was like no second place. It was always going to them. There was zero suspense. Paul Thomas Anderson had no chance in hell of winning on that first time around. I mean, I wouldn't put him in 5th place. Maybe he's in 4th. I do think he's ahead of Woody Allen deconstructing Harry. But as good as it gets is in picture, the full Monty is in picture, Boogie Nights is not. So yeah, the big win for Paul Thomas Anderson at this point is just getting the nomination at the Oscars, getting in there. I mean, he made a film about the porn industry. They could have snubbed him in screenplay. The Academy could have given Boogie Nights just supporting actor and supporting actress and nothing else. I think it's inspired that they also included PTA in original screenplay, so well deserved. A fantastic first Oscar nomination for anyone. It's crazy to think this was one of 14 to date, but here we are. What was Oscar nomination number 2? It's time to talk about my favorite PTA film of all time, Magnolia.
You will not control me. No! You will not take my soul. No! You will not win this game.
So 1999 is often considered one of the greatest years for movies, and one of the best from 99 is absolutely Paul Thomas Anderson's masterpiece, Magnolia. This epic and sprawling and fascinating 3-hour-plus film filled with so many interesting characters and relationships, people searching for love and truth and answers in the San Fernando Valley. This very ambitious film is filled top to bottom with wonderful performances and characters, including Tom Cruise as Frank T.J. Mackey. After the critical success of Boogie Nights and Paul Thomas Anderson getting an Oscar nomination, New Line Cinema basically gave him a blank check. They allowed him to do anything he wanted for his next movie. He got final cut, of course, and what he delivered in Magnolia was something truly astonishing, especially for such a young director. To be this bold, this confident and courageous, and really like sky's the limit with him when it comes to Magnolia. This incredible cast he assembled, some big name A-list stars, some lesser known who do wonderful work in that movie. Magnolia, coming out at the very end of 1999, was always going to be in the awards conversation. The question was, like, could it get into picture and director, which Boogie Nights couldn't? No, 1999 was a competitive year. There are some great films. And Magnolia, I think because of the 3-hour-plus running time, because of so many characters, because it came out really late. Like, it opened in limited release, like around Christmas, and then it went wider in January. There wasn't enough time to develop momentum for Magnolia in a way versus things like American Beauty and The Cider House Rules. Films that had been out longer had been gathering in strength for many months. Magnolia didn't quite have that, and I think its audaciousness. It was going to be a movie many critics and awards voters admired, but it wasn't going to be a favorite among many. So Best Picture, Best Director were not looking likely, but it was absolutely getting in at the Oscars. The question was, how many nominations? At the Golden Globes, we had another person win in Best Supporting Actor for a Paul Thomas Anderson movie, Boogie Nights in early 98, and in early 2000, Tom Cruise won Best Supporting Actor for Magnolia.
I've got to talk about Paul Thomas Anderson, who was quite brilliant.
At the Berlin International Film Festival, Paul Thomas Anderson won the Golden Berlin Bear for Magnolia, and at SAG, the film got 3 nominations, Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress, and Best Cast. So things were looking up. When it came to Oscar nominations morning, I was crossing my fingers because Magnolia was in my top 5 favorite films of the year. I wanted to see it get 5, 6, 7 nominations. That didn't happen. It got 3. At the 72nd Academy Awards on March 26, 2000, Magnolia got into Best Original Song, Save Me, music and lyric by Amy Mann, Best Supporting Actor for Tom Cruise, and Best Original Screenplay for Paul Thomas Anderson. Could have done better. I think cinematography and editing and Best Supporting Actress Julianne Moore also should have been on the table. but 3 is better than nothing, and PTA is here, so that's great. Save Me was never going to win Best Original Song. That was the year of Tarzan, You'll Be in My Heart. Like, nothing was beating that, let's be honest. Best Supporting Actor, I've talked about that race here on the channel. I made a whole video about Magnolia a few months ago. Tom Cruise was my choice to win there. He won at the Golden Globes. He got in at SAG. He was on his 3rd nomination. It's his career best performance still to this day. But the Academy instead went with Michael Caine for The Cider House Rules, the veteran actor everybody really loves in a movie nominated for Best Picture. It makes sense. But years later, it's like, really? Did we have to give that to Michael Caine? I don't know. Tom Cruise would have been a very deserving winner that year in Best Supporting Actor, and that takes us to PTA's Oscar nomination number 2. We're on number 2 here, Original Screenplay. The other nominees in the category are Being John Malkovich, The Sixth Sense, Topsy Turvy. The winner was American Beauty, Alan Ball. Which was a given, right? That film wins Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor. How is the screenplay going to miss? It's a very screenplay-centric film, the way it's structured, the dialogue, the characters. American Beauty was always taking that. Paul Thomas Anderson had no chance to win for Magnolia. He was probably in 4th place again. I would put him ahead of Topsy Turvy Mike Lee. That's probably in last place. But Charlie Kaufman for Being John Malkovich, M. Night Shyamalan for The Sixth Sense, yeah. I think those are slots 2 and 3. Paul Thomas Anderson is just happy to be there, even though his girlfriend at the time, Fiona Apple, looks very sad for him. I think she might have thought he had a chance to win, but he didn't, let's be honest. So moving into the 21st century, Paul Thomas Anderson has 2 screenwriting Oscar nominations. That's not nothing, right? He's made 3 films. He's gotten in at the Oscars twice. What's going to be his next Oscar nomination? Will it be for his next feature, 2002's Punch Drunk Love starring Adam Sandler?
Sir, your hand is bleeding.
I know.
I'm gonna have to ask you to leave.
Yeah, but I didn't do anything.
Sir, I've got no way to prove that you smashed up the bathroom.
I didn't do that.
What a breath of fresh air Punch Drunk Love was in the fall of 2002. It's very strange and quirky, but it's very much Paul Thomas Anderson. You recognize him in every frame in this, working with Adam Sandler of all people, who up until Punch Drunk Love was only doing comedies. He hadn't strayed from the formula. This was something different. He's still funny in it. He's got a sense of humor, but in this lovely, surreal, unusual romance drama, PTA dissects the Adam Sandler personality and makes something so deep and so rich, a film that really sticks with you in a variety of ways. It's very feel-good near the end, it's triumphant, the romance between Sandler and Emily Watson is off the charts, it's so great, and then you have Philip Seymour Hoffman kind of as the villain, or someone who's going up against the main character. He is fantastic too. Punch Drunk Love did very well with critics. Many critics like Roger Ebert, who had never given a positive review to an Adam Sandler movie, was praising his performance, praising the film. It was on my top 10 of the year. I love this movie. Was it going to get in at the Oscars? Not necessarily. I think the big problem that year with Punch Drunk Love, it was 2 things. It was a very competitive year. There are some great films in 2002. It was going to be tricky for Punch Drunk Love to break into the award scene, especially at the Oscars, and Adam Sandler playing the protagonist of the film. I do think that hurt this. I think there were probably enough awards voters at the end of the day, in the Academy, who were like, are we going to nominate an Adam Sandler movie? They weren't ready for it yet, so it didn't happen, but Adam Sandler got 1 big televised nomination for Punch Drunk Love, Best Actor in a Motion Picture Musical or Comedy. He's there. That's the year that Richard Gere wins for Chicago. I don't think Sandler really had a chance to win, but he's in the category, so that was something. And the big thing Paul Thomas Anderson won was Best Director at Cannes. Punch Drunk Love premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in May of 2002, and he won Best Director. So even though PTA still at this point only has Oscar nominations for his writing, he's winning Best Director at Cannes. He won the Golden Bear at the Berlin Film Festival, so he's racking up these nominations, these big wins. What is going to be the film that finally gets him an Oscar nomination for Best Director, not just writing? Well, that's next, right? 2007, There Will Be Blood.
Abandon my job. Say it louder.
Say it louder. I've abandoned my child! I've abandoned my child!
This was the turning point, the departure, the evolutionary change for Paul Thomas Anderson as a filmmaker. You look at Boogie Nights, Magnolia, Punch Drunk Love, they have a similar feel, all three of those movies. There Will Be Blood is something totally different. Anderson made a conscious choice to up his game, do something unexpected from him, and work with one of the greatest actors who has ever lived, Daniel Day-Lewis, as Daniel Plainview, a ruthless oil prospector at the turn of the century, driven by obsession and greed. This was a performance for the ages from one of our very best, working with a talented director on the rise. I will never forget seeing There Will Be Blood opening night in a crowded theater. The end of 2007, we'd already had No Country for Old Men, some really great films. Along comes There Will Be Blood. This is Paul Thomas Anderson's first feature film in 5 years, so I had a lot of anticipation. And oh my frickin' god, is this an incredible film. A masterpiece, to be sure. So complex in its themes and ideas, the character arc of Daniel Plainview from beginning to end over these 2 hours and 40 minutes, it is just fascinating to watch unfold. And Anderson has such a specific vision for the film, the way it looks, the way it sounds. On a technical level, There Will Be Blood is an astonishing achievement. It's so grand and epic in scale, and then you have that Daniel Day-Lewis performance. Yeah, this was always getting into the Oscars, and unlike Boogie Nights and Magnolia, this was going to do much better. It was going to get into screenplay again for Anderson, Best Actor of course for Daniel Day-Lewis, who ended up sweeping the season basically. It was also for PTA getting into director and picture. Before the Oscars, Daniel Day-Lewis was piling up the trophies for Best Actor. He wins at Golden Globes, he wins at SAG, he wins at BAFTA. Paul Thomas Anderson also won Best Director at the Berlin Film Festival, so they like him there. They gave him a prize for Magnolia, they give him director for There Will Be Blood. Anderson had made one of the greatest films easily of 2007, and so yeah, Oscars were calling his name. At the 80th Academy Awards on February 24th, 2008, There Will Be Blood was nominated for 8 Oscars. It got into 8 categories. It was nominated for Art Direction, Film Editing, and Sound Editing. It won Best Cinematography for Robert Elswit.
But we all know it really belongs to Paul, that this is his imagination and his energy and his extraordinary vision.
It of course also won Best Actor for Daniel Day-Lewis, one of the finest acting Oscar victories in history.
It seems to me that this sprang like a golden sapling out of the mad, beautiful head of Paul Thomas Anderson.
And that takes me to the 3 categories. Yes, 3 he got in at the Oscars for There Will Be Blood. Did he have a chance to win for any of these 3? You could argue he had the best chance. Like up until this point, versus Magnolia and Boogie Nights, he was definitely in the running if it hadn't have been for a film called No Country for Old Men. That film beats him 3 times. The 3 times he's nominated, he loses to No Country for Old Men. So Oscar nomination number 3, he gets into Best Adapted Screenplay. The other nominees are Atonement, Away from Her, The Diving Bell, and The Butterfly. The winner is No Country for Old Men for Joel Coen and Ethan Coen. I think he could have won in screenplay maybe if There Will Be Blood was original. He would have gone up against Diablo Cody for Juno. She would have been hard to take down. Juno was a very original script. It got into Best Picture. So maybe regardless he would have lost anyway in the screenwriting categories. But there was no way he was beating No Country for Old Men, given that that film goes on to win director and picture as well. Oscar nomination number 4 is of course Best Director for There Will Be Blood. He's finally in director. The nominees are Julian Schnabel, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, Jason Reitman, Juno, Tony Gilroy, Michael Clayton. The winners are Joel Coen and Ethan Coen, No Country for Old Men. You could ask yourself, well, maybe they could have spread the love. Maybe No Country for Old Men wins picture and adapted screenplay, but Paul Thomas Anderson wins director. I mean, his main actor has been sweeping. He takes Best Actor, Daniel Day-Lewis. Couldn't we also give PTA a win here? He's in 3 categories. He can't take something? I just think No Country for Old Men was a juggernaut, and it had a good reason to win in all of these categories. It's based on a famous book by Cormac McCarthy, so the adaptation of that book, that makes sense to win in screenplay. And then Joel Coen and Ethan Coen were very beloved and very much overdue. They had been making films since the 80s. I mean, so many great films, right? Blood Simple and Raising Arizona and Fargo and Barton Fink and Miller's Crossing, The Big Lebowski. It just goes on and on and on. They had won in screenplay at the Oscars for Fargo, but they had never won in director. So it made sense with No Country for Old Men, their most acclaimed film ever, they were going to win there. Paul Thomas Anderson was going to have to settle for number 2. I do think in all 3 of these categories for There Will Be Blood, he's in second place. If there's No Country for Old Men, I would not have to make this elusive Oscar video because he would have won many, many years ago for There Will Be Blood. Oscar nomination number 5 comes in the form of Best Picture for There Will Be Blood. The other nominees are Atonement, Juno, Michael Clayton. The winner is, of course, No Country for Old Men for Scott Rudin, Ethan Coen, and Joel Coen. This was just sewn up. We weren't going to get a Best Picture shocker. There Will Be Blood wins, like in a huge surprise. No Country for Old Men was coming on so strong, winning adapted screenplay, winning director. It was also taking picture. So sadly that night, Paul Thomas Anderson went 0 for 3, and heading into the 2010s, he had 5 Oscar nominations, 0 wins. What was going to be the film that got him a gold trophy? Was it going to be his next feature, 2012's The Master?
No, this isn't a discussion, it's a grilling. There's nothing I can do for you if your mind has been made up. You seem to know the answers to your questions. Why do you ask?
So this was another highly anticipated film from PTA in the fall of 2012. I could not wait. Joaquin Phoenix, his first narrative film in like 3.5 years. You had Philip Seymour Hoffman re-teaming with PTA. You had Amy Adams, who was on a streak there, right? I mean, she was getting Oscar nominated like every 2 years. And the subject matter of the film, the cinematography, just based on the trailers, this was going to be a special film. This fascinating period drama about a naval veteran played by Phoenix who gets swept up in a cult and its charismatic leader played by Hoffman really came on strong in those early weeks of the fall season. It opened in September. It wasn't like a Christmas Day release. It was earlier in the season. I was so struck by The Master, so many beautiful things about that film. The cinematography is just mind-boggling. It's so beautiful. Those performances by Phoenix and Hoffman and Adams are off the charts great. But walking out of the theater, I was a little concerned about its very long running time, about the subject matter primarily. I mean, just some of those early moments with Phoenix, I went, oh, maybe this isn't going to be a huge Oscar player. Maybe it's just going to get into the acting categories and nothing else. And that's what happened, sadly. I mean, I thought maybe original screenplay for Paul Thomas Anderson was on the table, but 2012 was a very competitive year in that category. The film did pretty well earlier in the season, like not at SAG. At SAG, it only got into supporting actor for Philip Seymour Hoffman, but at Critics' Choice, it gets 7 nominations, including screenplay for Paul Thomas Anderson. At BAFTA, it gets 4 nominations, including screenplay for PTA. He's also in at WGA, so he's getting some nominations for his script, not really for director. Although, he does get a really cool shout out at the Golden Globes, where he's not nominated, but Ben Affleck wins there Best Director for Argo. He gives PTA a wonderful shout out.
I want to thank the many talented people that weren't nominated. Paul Thomas Anderson, who's like, I think, like Orson Welles. There's so many others.
So on Oscar nominations morning, I wasn't really sure. I was like, I think Philip Seymour Hoffman is safe in supporting actor, but that could be it. Maybe it's just the one nomination. I was so happy and thrilled to see Adams and Phoenix also get in, especially Phoenix. I mean, that is a landmark performance, Joaquin Phoenix in The Master. It would have felt wrong to me if he had missed the Oscar nomination, so I'm happy that happened. PTA should be there as well, maybe not in director. It was very competitive in director. But like almost every great film he has made, he's gotten an Oscar nomination for screenplay. But that time around, it just wasn't in the cards for him. And nobody in The Master was going to win. Like in Best Actor, that was the year of Daniel Day-Lewis Lincoln. Like he was sweeping. Philip Seymour Hoffman had a chance in Supporting Actor because he won a Critics' Choice, and the category that season was very chaotic. Like someone new was winning at basically every big ceremony. So I thought that was going to be a really cool Oscar win for Philip Seymour Hoffman if it happened. I was rooting for him, but Christoph Waltz took the prize for Django Unchained, and Best Supporting Actress, that was Anne Hathaway all the way. So Amy Adams that year was just happy to be there. Paul Thomas Anderson never was going to win the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for The Master, but it would have been nice for him to at least been nominated. I mean, 14 Oscar nominations to date, and not one of those is for The Master? That makes no sense to me. But one film he did get an Oscar nomination for that, to be honest, kind of surprises me is 2014's Inherent Vice.
Listen.
So let's get this out of the way right at the top. This is my least favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie. I really despise it, actually. I watched it opening weekend at the end of 2014, very excited for a new PTA film starring Joaquin Phoenix, and that ensemble cast is an all-timer. I just don't engage with the vibes of this movie. I don't find it that interesting or entertaining or funny. It drifts along from scene to scene, and I don't care about anybody in the film or anything that's happening. I admire the cinematography, the soundtrack, certain things technically with that film, but on a story level, it just leaves me totally cold. So I walked out disappointed. It was on my worst films of the year list for 2014. This dark comedy set in 1970 about a private investigator in Los Angeles who investigates the disappearance of his former girlfriend had its fans. Some people really liked it. I might not have been one of them, but enough people enjoyed its humor, enjoyed its quirkiness, and that cast, I mean, you have Reese Witherspoon and Josh Brolin, Martin Short is very memorable in a couple scenes. It's not a total waste of time. I just think when it comes to the world of Paul Thomas Anderson movies, this is one of the lesser ones. I just didn't think Inherent Vice was good enough to get Oscar nominations, maybe a technical category. I mean, it does okay in the precursors. Joaquin Phoenix gets in at the Globes. At Critics' Choice, it gets 4 nominations, including 1 for PTA and Screenplay. It gets a few shout-outs along the way, but I was like, at the Oscars, I think they're going to sit this one out. No, it gets 2 nominations. It gets into Best Costume Design, and it gets into Best Adapted Screenplay for Paul Thomas Anderson. Again, nothing for PTA when it comes to The Master at the Oscars, but Inherent Vice, this is Oscar nomination number 6 at the 87th Academy Awards on February 22nd, 2015. The other nominees in Adapted Screenplay are American Sniper, The Theory of Everything, Whiplash. The winner is The Imitation Game for Graham Moore. There was talk about maybe an alternate winner here. I was really pulling for Whiplash, Damien Chazelle. That was my favorite film of 2014. I wanted to see Damien Chazelle win an Academy Award for that. It didn't happen. The Imitation Game was just so well liked that season. It made sense to win here. Graham Moore gives that wonderful speech. I really liked what he had to say on the stage. The Imitation Game is in Best Picture. So yeah, that one makes sense. This is a rare case. It might be the only time where Paul Thomas Anderson at the Oscars is in last place, is in 5th place. You look at this category for 2014, every other film is in Best Picture. The Imitation Game, American Sniper, The Theory of Everything, and Whiplash. They're all in picture. Inherent Vice just has this and costume design. Yeah, he was not winning that. His win that season was just getting the Oscar nomination for Inherent Vice. But thankfully, we only had to wait 3 more years for the next PTA movie, and this was going to be one of his best. Could Phantom Thread finally win Paul Thomas Anderson his elusive Academy Award?
I'm standing around like an idiot, waiting for you.
Waiting for what?
Waiting for you.
Waiting for what?
Waiting for you to get rid of me.
Paul Thomas Anderson's Phantom Thread is a gem. It is so luscious to look at. It's so beautifully acted. The production design, like the setting of this movie, 1950s London. Daniel Day-Lewis reteaming with PTA a decade after There Will Be Blood. He plays Reynolds Woodcock, a renowned dressmaker whose life is upended by a new woman in his life, Alma, played by Vicky Krieps, who becomes his lover and muse. It's such an unusual narrative, but it really pulls you in and never lets go. It's so confidently written and directed and acted and photographed and scored. It is just such a great time at the movies. Phantom Thread, I have watched 3 or 4 times now, and it really is one of Paul Thomas Anderson's best. It's never in a rush to get anywhere, but it's never boring. It's a fascinating character study that only Paul Thomas Anderson could have given us. The richness, the depth, the complexity of these characters. Phantom Thread is easily one of the finest films of 2017, and so you would think it would be at the top of the list of major awards contenders in early 2018. That's not what happened. If you guys remember, even though Phantom Thread ultimately does pretty well at the Oscars, the precursors not so much. Paul Thomas Anderson doesn't show up in Best Director anywhere, really, until Oscar nominations morning. He's not nominated in Director at Golden Globes or Critics' Choice or even BAFTA for this movie. It's only at the Oscars. Daniel Day-Lewis gets in at Golden Globes and Critics' Choice, but not even at SAG. He's not even nominated for Best Actor at SAG. There were some hiccups along the way when it came to Phantom Thread and award season. It wasn't clear, was this even going to get into the Oscars? What was happening? The big problem with Phantom Thread is that it came out really, really late in the season. It was the final big awards contender of 2017 to open in theaters. It comes out in limited release on Christmas Day and doesn't go wide until later in January. So it took a while for all of us to see Phantom Thread. I think that's why it's not a big part of the Globes and Critics' Choice and especially SAG. Not enough people had seen it yet. But once everyone got their eyeballs on Phantom Thread, they recognized the power of this film, how incredible it was, and so even though it took a while for this film to catch on with awards voters, it came on strong at just the right time and got 6 Oscar nominations, including 2 for Paul Thomas Anderson. At the 90th Academy Awards on March 4th, 2018, Phantom Thread was nominated in 2 technical categories, costume design and score. It got into 2 acting categories, Best Actor for Daniel Day-Lewis and Best Supporting Actress Leslie Manville, and it received nominations for Best Director and Best Picture of the Year. Pretty solid, I would say, especially considering how poorly Phantom Thread was doing earlier during award season. I mean, I think the big snub here is Best Original Screenplay for Paul Thomas Anderson. How did he miss in Screenplay? The Academy clearly loved the film, and there are 10 possible slots in the screenplay categories. You'd think if he could make it into Director, he could also get into Original Screenplay, but that didn't happen. Original Screenplay that year was very competitive. That's the year of Get Out and Lady Bird. There just wasn't room, unfortunately. And I guess you can point to Phantom Thread as a movie. You don't necessarily have to reward the script, so I mean, I kind of get it. Because Phantom Thread was such a late breaker that season, it didn't really have much of a chance to win anything on Oscars night, outside of maybe a technical category, which it did, Best Costume Design.
Oh, first I want to thank Paul Thomas Anderson for writing this amazing script and having me design it. Thank you, Paul.
Best Original Score would have been a great win for Johnny Greenwood. He still to date has never won an Oscar, and his work on Phantom Thread is spectacular. But that prize went to The Shape of Water, which was also deserving. Leslie Manville in Best Supporting Actress had no shot in hell of winning. Outside of a total shocker, she was the big surprise just to get the nomination. She had not really been a part of the award season at all, and then she slipped in there in Best Supporting Actress. That was such a cool and inspired Oscar nomination. The Academy didn't have to do that. They could have just nominated Day-Lewis in the acting categories and called it a day. They also included Manville. I think that's great. Daniel Day-Lewis had just won his 3rd Oscar for Best Actor 5 years before, for Lincoln, of course. They weren't going to give him a 4th victory. That was not going to happen, even though he had already announced his retirement, his so-called retirement, and so I guess you could point to that and say, he's never going to act in a movie again, give him one more. It just wasn't going to happen. He was just happy to be there and Best Actor that year. Now, did Paul Thomas Anderson have any shot to win? He's on his 7th and 8th nominations. Can he finally win one for Phantom Thread? No. No, he really didn't have a shot. Like, getting into director at the Oscars for Phantom Thread was such a shocker, kind of like the Leslie Manville thing. Just him getting into director at the Academy Awards that year, that was the win for Anderson. We are on Oscar nomination number 7, Best Director for Phantom Thread. The other nominees are Christopher Nolan, Dunkirk, Jordan Peele, Get Out, Greta Gerwig, Lady Bird. The winner was Guillermo del Toro, The Shape of Water. As I talked about in Christopher Nolan in the Elusive Oscar video I made 2 years back, this category this year was always going to Del Toro. There was no question. He won in director at Golden Globes and Critics' Choice and BAFTA and DGA. He basically swept the season in director, so there was no chance for anyone else in that Oscars category, not Greta Gerwig or Jordan Peele. Christopher Nolan seemed like a shoo-in early on in the season for Dunkirk, a World War II movie, a very beloved figure in the world of filmmaking, like making his big awards contender film, unlike anything he had made before. But no, they still went with Del Toro, and I do think in this category, if I had to pick the 5th place slot in director at the Oscars, it is probably Paul Thomas Anderson. Even though he's on his 7th and 8th nomination, because his film broke so late, he's not at DGA, he's not at all of these big precursors in director, I just think he was happy to be there, and that goes for his 8th nomination in Best Picture. The other nominees there are Call Me By Your Name, Darkest Hour, Dunkirk, Get Out, Lady Bird, The Post, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. The winner was, of course, The Shape of Water. I guess you could argue we could have had a surprise in Best Picture that year. Like, maybe Best Picture could have gone to something else. It wasn't going to go to Phantom Thread. It wasn't in last place. Like, I would say probably The Post is in last, because that's only in Best Picture and Best Actress for Meryl Streep. But it's probably around 5th or 6th or 7th or something. Like, that wasn't going to win Best Picture. So Paul Thomas Anderson went home empty-handed again. After 8 losses, still nothing, no gold trophy that says his name at the Academy Awards. But his next film, opening in 2021, this looked like it could be the one to do it. The one that could finally win him an Oscar. It's time to talk about Licorice Pizza.
Do you know who I am?
Yeah.
Do you know who my girlfriend is?
Barbra Streisand?
Barbra Streisand.
Sand,
yeah, like sands.
Up until one battle after another, Licorice Pizza was PTA's best chance at a victory. He came very close, I think, as we'll talk about. This is also not one of my favorite films of his. I like it better than Inherent Vice. But I'm not a huge fan of Licorice Pizza. I admire elements of it. The cinematography, the performances are very nice, the score. It's got things I like in it. It's not fully successful in my eyes. But this quirky love story starring Alana Haim and Cooper Hoffman, set in the San Fernando Valley, 1973, has a lot to like about it. It kind of goes back to the flavor of his earlier films like Boogie Nights, Magnolia, and Punch Drunk Love. It feels more like those than it does Phantom Thread, The Master, There Will Be Blood. Another fantastic ensemble cast, a who's who of great actors, and Paul Thomas Anderson just having a blast in this one every step of the way. Like Phantom Thread, Licorice Pizza comes out way late in the year. It comes out Christmas Day of 2021, but the lateness this time didn't seem to affect the film when it came to award season, because Licorice Pizza, up until the Oscars, I would argue, kind of the opposite of Phantom Thread, it was doing really well. It got 4 Golden Globe nominations, including Best Motion Picture Comedy or Musical, and Paul Thomas Anderson is nominated for his screenplay. At Critics' Choice, the film gets 8 nominations, does very well. Paul Thomas Anderson gets in at DGA. He is finally nominated again at DGA many years after There Will Be Blood. And then at BAFTA, PTA wins Best Original Screenplay. He's not there to accept the prize. Johnny Greenwood accepts on his behalf, but he wins a BAFTA award, and that is something awesome.
Paul is going to be very excited to win this. not least because it means I've been forced to come and give a really awkward and inarticulate speech on his behalf, which you will find very funny.
At BAFTA, he's also nominated in director and picture, and so yeah, at the Oscars, it seemed very probable Licorice Pizza could get 5, 6, maybe 7 nominations in acting categories, technical categories. 2021 was kind of a wonky year for movies. It wasn't the best, right? You look at that Best Picture lineup, and there's like a couple there you could take out, and this wasn't the most competitive year at the Oscars in the last decade, I would say. So Licorice Pizza and Paul Thomas Anderson, it looked likely things were going to go well, and the movie got in at the Oscars, but it's not in acting, it's not in a technical category, it's only in 3 top categories, and they're all for Paul Thomas Anderson. At the 94th Academy Awards on March 27, 2022, PTA was nominated in Picture, Director, and Screenplay. He was on his 9th and 10th and 11th Oscar nominations without a win. They had to give him one this time, right? The Academy was not going to let PTA go home an 11-time loser, were they? Were they? Even though I wasn't a huge fan of the film, it was time for PTA to win his elusive Oscar, and it was going to happen on Oscar nomination number 9, Best Original Screenplay. The other nominees were Don't Look Up, King Richard, The Worst Person in the World. The winner was Belfast for Kenneth Branagh. Man, I bet this was close. I can't imagine Kenneth Branagh won in like a landslide. Paul Thomas Anderson with 11 Oscar nominations and no wins. He wasn't going to win director or picture, but he had a good chance here. He won Best Original Screenplay at BAFTA. Why couldn't he also win at the Oscars? I think if Kenneth Branagh and Belfast are not in this category, PTA would have won his first Oscar for Licorice Pizza. And I would not be making this video right now. Like, he would have one in screenplay, but Kenneth Branagh was also very much overdue. He had been nominated time and time again, going back to the early 1990s without a win. He'd been nominated in a variety of categories like Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, Best Director, Best Live Action Shorts. He had been in a variety of categories going back decades, had never won. Belfast is in Picture and Director for Branagh and Screenplay. So it came down to those two. I was really like in the middle there. It also made sense that Branagh could pull it off, but I went with PTA because, again, he was on 11 nominations and he had that BAFTA victory. So I was feeling PTA. In retrospect, I think something that helped Branagh and Belfast to win here was that his movie was in acting categories. It was also in sound and song. Like, it had more nominations. It made more sense that Belfast would win something with multiple nominations versus Licorice Pizza, which only has the main 3. So sadly, Paul Thomas Anderson lost Best Original Screenplay for Licorice Pizza, and then he didn't win in director or picture either. Oscar nomination number 10 is Best Director. The other nominees are Kenneth Branagh, Belfast, Ryosuke Hamaguchi, Drive My Car, Steven Spielberg, West Side Story. The winner was Jane Campion, The Power of the Dog. Like Guillermo del Toro, The Shape of Water a few years before, he had swept basically everything in director. The same thing happened with Jane Campion, The Power of the Dog, even though her movie wins no other Oscar. It doesn't take picture or an acting category or a technical category. She was a sure thing to win Best Director at the Oscars that night. No one else in the category had a prayer in hell. She was just so strong. She had won a screenplay Oscar in the 90s for The Piano, and her vision of The Power of the Dog, even those who didn't love that movie, they wanted to give it Best Director, so Jane Campion went home with her Oscar in directing. And Oscar nomination number 11, Best Picture. The other nominees were Belfast, Don't Look Up, Drive My Car, Dune, King Richard, Nightmare Alley, The Power of the Dog, West Side Story. The winner was Coda. Remember that? Remember when Coda won Best Picture? It was only in 3 categories: Picture, Supporting Actor, and Adapted Screenplay, and it won all 3. No other film had a chance, really, in the top category, even The Power of the Dog. Momentum was surging at just the right time for Coda. It won in SAG Ensemble, it won at PGA. Even though it didn't even have a nomination in director, Coda was winning Best Picture. Licorice Pizza was losing in picture and director and screenplay. and Paul Thomas Anderson was going home empty-handed again. 11 nominations to date, 0 wins. 0 wins still, after decades, after being acknowledged time and time again for so many amazing movies. When was the Academy going to finally give Paul Thomas Anderson a fucking Oscar? When was it going to happen? Well, I have 4 words for you. One battle after another.
I was trying to get the rendezvous point for my daughter,
right.
Willa.
If you can't answer what time is it, I cannot give you the rendezvous point.
So throughout 2025, there was hope, right? The new Paul Thomas Anderson film on the horizon, and this looked promising. I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio and Benicio del Toro, Sean Penn, Tiana Taylor, Regina Hall, so many great people were in the latest PTA film. When I saw the first still of the movie, when I saw the first trailer, I was like, oh yeah, this looks really freaking great. Come on, man, just deliver. This could be the movie that finally wins Paul Thomas Anderson his Oscar. I was hearing good buzz throughout the summer, but it was kind of muted. And then about 2 weeks before it opened, it started getting screened. And I was hearing from film critic friends who saw it early that this was Paul Thomas Anderson's masterpiece. If not the very best, near the top. I went to see One Battle After Another on opening night, and within 20 to 30 minutes, I was like, oh yeah, this is the best film of 2025. It is loaded with brilliance from the first scene to the last. Those performances, that ensemble, the cinematography, the score, the editing, that narrative that just keeps you in its grip, keeps surprising you every step of the way. It made me laugh, it made me cry, it made me fall in love with the movies all over again. This is PTA's best film since Magnolia. I mean, it's right up there. When I walked out of the theater, I was grinning ear to ear. I mean, I had just seen something extraordinary, one of the defining films, I think, of the 2020s. Paul Thomas Anderson just needed to make the right movie at the right time. One Battle After Another is that movie. So going into this award season, the 2026 award season, things were looking good for One Battle After Another and Paul Thomas Anderson. I mean, in December, he was winning a lot of director prizes from critics around the country. The movie was winning Best Picture. It got a boatload of Critics' Choice nominations and Golden Globe nominations. And yeah, after many, many years of his films, like doing okay, There Will Be Blood does the best, right? At the Oscars, that gets 8 nominations. But many of his movies, it'll get like 3. Here we have a film that's going to dominate. Maybe not as much as Sinners, right? But One Battle After Another was always going to do very well. And no matter what happened ultimately in a variety of categories when it comes to this movie, Paul Thomas Anderson in Best Director, it was looking really good. At the Critics' Choice Awards, Best Director went to Paul Thomas Anderson for One Battle After Another. He gave kind of a messy speech, but, you know, he won.
Look out, seeing Ryan's face makes me feel good. Love you, yeah.
And then a week later at the Golden Globe Awards, he wins Best Director again.
I'll take it with the love that it's given and the appreciation. I love doing what I do, so this is just fun.
I mean, this has been a very special moment for any PTA fan who has been waiting years, decades, for him to finally get his flowers come award season. It seemed like he might win something for There Will Be Blood, no. And then Phantom Thread, he got in at the end there, but nothing. Licorice Pizza, he came very close to winning original screenplay at the Oscars, but no. Now is his time. He won director at Critics' Choice and Golden Globes. He's probably winning at DGA and at BAFTA. And yes, he is finally coming for his elusive Oscar. One Battle After Another got 13 nominations at the 98th Academy Awards. 13. I mean, it's not quite as good as 16 for Sinners, right? Sinners became like the first movie in history to get more than 14 Oscar nominations, but 13 for One Battle After Another is an amazing haul as well. That's 5 more nominations than any PTA film has ever received at the Academy Awards. And with his latest film, Paul Thomas Anderson now has 14 nominations. He's in Adapted Screenplay, Director, and Picture. 14. As of this recording, without a win. But let's be honest, that win is coming, or wins, plural, at the 98th Academy Awards on March 15th, 2026. One Battle After Another, as I said, has 13 nominations, including Best Casting, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, Best Original Score, Best Production Design, and Best Sound. It got 4 acting nominations: Best Actor for Leonardo DiCaprio, Best Supporting Actor for Benicio del Toro and Sean Penn, and Best Supporting Actress for Tiana Taylor. It remains to be seen which of these will win. Tiana Taylor is looking pretty good, but it's still early in the season, so we have to see how things shake out. But one thing is for sure, on these final 3 nominations to talk about, Paul Thomas Anderson is winning at least one. Oscar nomination number 12 is in Best Adapted Screenplay. The other nominees are Bugonia, Frankenstein, Hamnet, and Train Dreams. I think this one is a given. Like, he is winning this. Paul Thomas Anderson has won Adapted Screenplay basically everywhere up until this point, and with his film having 13 nominations, being one of the top 2 movies of the year at the Oscars, there's just no way PTA is going to lose this screenwriting prize. Remember, his first Oscar nomination back in 1998 was in Screenplay, Original Screenplay for Boogie Nights. He's gotten a lot of nominations in these 2 categories, Adapted and Original Screenplay. He is finally going to win for One Battle After Another. The only other nominee you could argue has a chance is Hamnet in Adapted Screenplay, but that's a distant second place, I think. That film missed in a couple key categories at the Oscars, and I just don't think it's winning Adapted Screenplay, especially over One Battle After Another. So it's looking good for PTA and Adapted Screenplay. Now let's move on to Oscar nomination number 13, Best Director. The other nominees are Chloe Zhao, Hamnet, Josh Safdie, Marty Supreme, Joachim Trier, Sentimental Value, and Ryan Coogler, Sinners. Again, I think Paul Thomas Anderson is winning this category too, Best Director. It's not enough to just give him Adapted Screenplay and that's it. Like, we'll see what happens in picture, but Paul Thomas Anderson, I am basically 100% certain, is winning the Oscar for Best Director. This is his Christopher Nolan moment. A great filmmaker who's been doing amazing work for decades. He's been nominated all over the place. He has made one of his very best movies in One Battle After Another. I am pretty damn certain Paul Thomas Anderson is taking director. The only other person who can beat him is Ryan Coogler's Sinners, whose movie, as I said, got 16 nominations. He's definitely in second place. I don't think he's a distant second place. He's up there. But I just don't think anyone can overtake PTA this time around in Best Director. And finally, Oscar nomination 14, Best Picture. The other nominees are Bugonia, F1, Frankenstein, Hamnet, Marty Supreme, The Secret Agent, Sentimental Value, Sinners, and Train Dreams. I am feeling pretty good right now that Paul Thomas Anderson is winning the Oscars for Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Director. Is he also going to win Best Picture for One Battle After Another? He is one of the 3 producers on that. He would take home a gold trophy if One Battle After Another won Picture. The film has done very well in the picture category going back the last few weeks. With Sinners having 16 nominations, there is a chance, even if PTA takes Adapted Screenplay and Director, Sinners wins Best Picture. That could happen. I think we should all be prepared for that, but it might just be One Battle After Another. If that's the case, Paul Thomas Anderson isn't going home a loser again at the Oscars. He's not going home 0 for 1 or 0 for 2 or 3 or whatever it is. He would go home 3 for 3. He would go home with 3 Academy Awards. And after all this time, all of the spectacular films he has made going back to the 90s, after all of these nominations he has had year after year, decade after decade, never winning anything, Paul Thomas Anderson, 14 Oscar nominations. This is your time. This is your moment. Finally holding your elusive Oscar.